Thank you, Minister. Recognizing a member for Burnaby Lougheed.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I do want to start off with taking this opportunity to first express my gratitude and my thanks to the people in my life. Like it is for every member taking a seat in this chamber, I too was raised, elected, and supported by a community, an army of people. Assisting our residents in Burnaby Lougheed is a vital work that I do in my community office, and that won't be possible without the incredible team of staff and volunteers that are serving at the front line. So I would like to mention Crystal Smith, Emma Lee, Katrina Kang, Joseph Lee, Eva Parkichin, Lynn Lee, Sophie Jun, and Tiffany Kim. Those are our amazing people that are working in our office. Public service is not a job one clocks in and out. I carry this work with me 24/7, as do all the members in this house. And so often my team would also go well beyond their call of duty, texting and emailing with me all around the clock, making themselves available on weeknights, weekends, and holidays included. So over the last half a year, we've become the kind of family that I know without a shadow of doubt serves our community well. I would also like to acknowledge the dedication and commitment of my constituency association led by our president, Glenn Porter, and executives. These are the people that I think who are first to break the sweat and last on the list of accolades. Too often these nameless and faceless people are the ones that are unsung heroes in the background that quietly make history and changing our world for the better. So I do want to say my thanks and express my sincere gratitude for Duke Tran, Victoria Benham, Gary Wong, Lil Cameron, Sage Aaron, Yunhee Park, Jin Na, Paul Dayson, Craig Langston, Jason Hamarson. Happy birthday, by the way, it's his birthday today. Harmon Pender, Lisa Park, Graham Halson, Dolores Miles, Zeph Zurek, and Ian McNulty. Now, there are 53,000 of our Burnaby Lougheed residents, community stakeholders, as well as business leaders, many of whom I've gotten to know over the years, both on the campaign trail and since the election. And I must thank them for sharing with me their ideas and concerns and suggestions and dreams, from trophy hunting of the Great Bears to opt-out monthly fee for a smart meter, from the liquor policy review to Kinder Morgan pipeline project, from BC Films and TV to food safety inspection. The issues in Burnaby Lougheed, as I'm sure it is for many communities, they're just as diverse as our population. And it is their passion and their care that continue to humble and inspire me. And I thank each and every one of them for fueling my fire on to continue on in this job. And lastly, I do want to thank my family, who I'm sure is stalking me on Hansard right now as we speak, praying with their worry-filled hearts that I may serve the mandate of this office to my very best. Now, with all of that said, it is with a great sense of responsibility that I do rise in this house today to respond to the government's 2014 budget on behalf of Burnaby Lougheed. Now, I've thought this many times over, how I can best articulate the concerns of Burnaby Lougheed in a manner that's respectful and constructive. Because my interest to be here is so that I can bring the voices and bring perspectives that perhaps members opposite wouldn't hear from their circles of influence. And so that's how I'm coming into this discussion. I understand all the members in this house have the best interests of the residents that they represent in mind. And so that is the piece that I would like to say out front, that I'm not here to heckle or snicker and all the little things that I see we partake in that I'm not necessarily proud of. So with that said, despite the fact that I now realize, since having seen the culture of the chamber and what takes place here, or the kind of conversations that do happen or actually don't occur at all sometimes in this house, I do understand that for the most part I am talking to the camera. I thought I would be discussing with and chatting with 84 members from across the province, but I have seen over and over that that's not necessarily what happens here. With that said, though, I still painstakingly craft every sentence of every speech I've gotten up to deliver here with the intention that if I can just make it as thoughtful as I can possibly make it, that maybe, just maybe, it might cross this invisible party lines and register on the other side. And maybe it's the political innocence in me that hasn't been beaten down dead yet, that I'm still gonna hope. I'm still going to hope. Because before I am a member for Burnaby Lougheed, I'm also a citizen who does care for British Columbia like all of you. And I share many of the concerns with my fellow residents in Burnaby Lougheed in my community. So what I'm gonna do is this is where my script actually stops. So I know. And so I'm gonna put my script away, and I want to converse with you, or at least attempt to, in the midst of all the heckling and snickering that I hope is going to be minimal, at least for me. So my response to the budget, finally, is that I do want to applaud the government when it comes to their strong sense of fiscal discipline and prudence, which it completely resonates with me. That's my upbringing. I come from an immigrant family who understood how to balance our books. So this is something that I fully support as far as the government's claim goes. Now, with that said, though, when I do put on my critical thinking hat in the midst of all the numbers and facts that are thrown, and some of them used selectively by, I think, both sides of the House, I do have to ask certain questions, not from a place of criticism, but from a place of genuine inquiry. As a citizen, as a representative, that have same questions that I'm sure every member in this House asks at some point. There's a claim that this government won't seek more from its citizens through tax increases. I support that. Who wouldn't agree with that? But there are fees upon fees upon fees, and I'm not coming from a place where everything should be free for all. Obviously, it's not possible. But with that said, though, there are the MSPs, and I know everybody's heard it over and over. It has doubled, and MSP is something that I've had the fortune of having great jobs that's always covered for my MSPs, that I never really paid attention to the kind of burden that this is for the lower middle income families who are making too much to qualify for the subsidies and exemptions, yet are at jobs or are entrepreneurs that you end up paying these incredible amounts, $70, $80 for a single, easily into the hundreds for a family of 3 and more. And this number is going up and up and up every year. And this is the only province that has this so-called fee, which our side of the House mentions it as a tax, which I think is a legitimate criticism. I really think so. And the tuition has increased. It's averaging $5,000. 10 years ago when I was at UBC, I remember paying barely $2,000, $2,500. So the number has gone up. It has doubled over the last decade. It's well past the inflation rate on an annual basis. And we know that this number is in fact double what the students in Quebec and Newfoundland pays. And there's the ferries cost. There's the PSA fees. There's the wheelchair fees. There's the ICVC. For my car insurance as a new driver, I'm paying $360 for my little Fiat per month. And that's a lot of money. And it's not easy on our families. And of course, there's a hydro that's going up, and the list goes on, fees upon fees upon fees upon fees. And yes, I do agree, and I hear loud and clear that the taxes may not have increased on that front, but what about all the user fees all across the board? And these are real numbers that do dig into the pockets of our families, and I'm not sure how to square that with the government's claim that affordability for our average families in our province hasn't changed. I can't make that math work in my head. But with that, there's a second claim, there's a claim in the budget that monies won't be taken from elsewhere in the fiscal plan that won't hurt any services nor programs. But again, I can't square that when every day I'm getting phone calls and emails from desperate community stakeholders, and I'm sure the members opposite hear from them too. I'm not the only one that's getting solicited. And groups like Pacific Postpartum Support Society, Burnaby Association for Community Inclusion are just a few from my own writing in my community that's crippled with the funding cut. They're looking at their demands. Their call volumes are doubling, tripling over the last few years. While the funding has remained stagnant, understandably, times are tough. But the funding has decreased or it has been cut flat out in certain incidences. And in those cases, it's hard for me to just nod my head along, even though it sounds great and I want to believe it. It's hard for me to just accept the fact that this government hasn't hurt services and programs. I can't square that. So the reality of this budget is that my families, the families that I represent in Burnaby-Lougheed, will be putting out more and will be getting less, and I think that is the bottom line. And I'm stating that not in a spirit of criticism, but that is the observations that I'm collecting. But also at the same time, there are things that I hear from members opposite say that times are tough, absolutely, and I get it, and we are all in this together, and everyone means well. We are working very hard, looking for opportunities where we can create more income, LNG or resource sector. And I know that we are pinching everywhere we can to make the numbers work or balance the budget. So I understand that we are in this together and we're gonna ride out this or toughen through this storm together, and everyone has to tighten their belts just a little bit more, put out a little bit more, and I'm all for that. Of course we get that. But again, I am struck with the reality that I get inquiries from not just me, but inquiries from my angry residents that were devastated that there was a pay increase for the Liberal staff just right after the election. And one of the rationale that I heard is that I think it was the chief of staff, that she'll be effectively assuming 2 jobs and therefore deserve double the pay. When in fact, the stakeholders in my community, the organizations in my community are so pinched to the point that when somebody goes on a maternity leave, they don't fill that position. If one person takes on to another opportunity, leaves the province, go to Alberta or wherever, they don't fill those positions. They ask somebody else to take on those extra tasks. So I understand tightening belts and everybody put out more, but it feels like those rules only apply to the most desperate and the least privileged of us. And that's where, again, I can't make the math work and I can't square that argument. And there is the increased size in cabinet, and I don't think anybody on our side of the house is asking the government to just keep spending, spend more, spend more. How are we going to spend when we don't have the income coming in to match that? So of course, but if $10 is coming in and we are spending $10 to make the numbers balanced, it's not that we're asking the government to take that $10 and spend $15 we don't have, $20 we don't have. I think what we are asking is, can we have a closer look at where we are spending those $10? How are we spending those $10? Because at a time where it's tough, I get my briefing notes, and when I read stuff like Vancouver Convention Center, the BC Place Roof, we've all heard this. But the numbers of overrun is incredible. I mean, we are talking about cost overrun that's easily double, and sometimes in some incidences, BC Place Roof, the original projection was to spend $100 million in that project, and the final price tag for the taxpayers were $514 million. That's $414 million in overrun. And it's not that this was a bad project. These are all great infrastructure renovations and investments that I think makes our province stronger and attracts businesses, opens up opportunities, created jobs. I get all of that, but how do I explain the $414 million that we didn't need to spend that could have gone elsewhere? I met with the Dental Association that just mentioned that if we can just find 500,000, we're not talking $500 million, but just $500,000, the number of dental surgeries that we can provide for those who need it the most, so that they don't end up with an emergency situation at our emergency rooms in the hospital, and again costing and weighing more on our healthcare system that's already heavily burdened. And so when I look at these numbers, That's where I think our questions are coming from, not in a spirit of criticism, but in the spirit of accountability and just simply seeking answers. Could we have done better on some of these projects? And there's a list of them. There's a Northwest Transmission Line, $332 million over budget. Vancouver Convention Center, $341 million over budget. BC Place Roof, $414 million overrun. Portman Highway Bridge, $1.8 billion overrun. These numbers are so big in my mind, it's mind-boggling. So these are the numbers that we throw around, and I've heard arguments from both sides of the house, but at the end of the day, could these money have been better spent on the social services and programs that our families are deprived of? And those are the questions that I'm getting from my constituents, and those are the questions that I thought I can ask here and get some legitimate answers from. But that's not how it takes place here, and I get that. Now, one of the things that I wanted to do in response to the budget today is share just a very brief summary of all the inquiries that's come through my office just in the last few months. And I thought some of these are very quote-worthy for me to share. Most people in my community sometimes don't even know the difference between a government and opposition. And so when they ask me a question, that is something that they read on the newspaper saying, what happened there, Jane? Or what happened there, Jane? I try to answer it from the government's perspective. If I was member opposite, what would I say in response to that? Because my intention is to walk a mile in your shoes. But when I get a question like dated February 13th, Jane, I dropped into your office the other day to express my deep disgust with the Liberals' decision to challenge, once again, the court's over class size in our education system. This offends me greatly, to say the least, that the cost to the taxpayers already of the two previous legal challenges is appalling, but to add more legal costs is very serious. And indeed, I urge your party to challenge this decision and to the fullest degree possible. So these are the emails that's coming through my office day in and day out, that my staff are working their hardest to seek answers, find answers, so that we can produce legitimate, accurate answers. And I can't find them. I have heard the messages that our minister has put out in response to allegations of this nature, but how can I ignore the court rulings? The court rulings that have spoken loud and clear that this was in fact what happened. So for me, that, amongst many other issues that come through my community, is what I was hoping to voice in this house today in response to the budget. But I'll move on to some of the other pressing issues in my community. I think that all of the issues that occur can be collectively summed into a theme of affordability in BC. So under that category, there's childcare, there's early learning, what's happening with housing. In Burnaby, if you were to get a one-bedroom, just a tiny little one-bedroom apartment, you'll be spending $250,000. You'll be hard-pressed to find anything less than $400,000 for a decent two-bedroom apartment to raise a family in. So there's a real housing crisis, and I didn't see anything in the budget that would provide me with answers that I can go back to my constituents and be able to explain how their tax dollars are being spent by this government to provide relief for some of these real challenges that our families are facing today. And there's the ever-rising cost of transportation. And there's the healthcare. As members know, Burnaby Hospital is an aging hospital that's desperately in need of repair. There was a glimmer of hope during the election campaign that the Liberal government promised that there is an active plan that's being developed to make sure that the Burnaby Hospital sees the renovations that it needs. And since the election, of course, we haven't heard on that front. And again, I understand that money is always going to be an issue. There's no unlimited source of money that's going to fix all of our problems and make them go away. And I appreciate the government's effort to try and look for those answers, whether it's LNG or in other resource industry. But also at the same time, we do have an aging hospital that needs to be looked at. So what can I do as the member for Burnaby-Lougheed to make sure that this gets tabled and it is considered? It's one of those questions that I'm still trying to figure out. The overall care in our healthcare system, yes, we can look at it as a glass half full, but it's hard not to look at what we are missing. The funding to healthcare has not kept up to the demand that we need to meet the demands of our population as it stands right now. And these are some of the things that I'm hearing. I'm hearing that morning staff, because of the staffing challenges and the funding shortcut or funding shortage, we are looking at morning staff being creative to look for solutions because they're desperate. They're trying to keep up with the workload by negotiating with the night staff to do the morning care for their residents before the night staff goes home. So let's divvy up the work. So what that means is night staff, before they leave in the morning, they start to perform morning care, which means wake people up, strip them down, put them on the toilet, dress them up, put their shoes on, prop them up on the chair so that they can wait for their breakfast time as early as 4:30 a.m., 5 a.m. You're waking up people, you're waking up seniors in the middle of night where sleep is the only real quality of life that they can fully enjoy, especially when they have dementia or any other issues. You're waking people up at those hours and be propped on their chair for 2-3 hours until it's their breakfast time in the morning. Those are the kind of creativity that our organizations, institutions, hospitals, schools are resorting to make their numbers work at their end. And of course, residents, when you're being woken up like that, they will complain. They'll go back to their families and they'll complain that, look, I'm being woken up at 4 a.m., 5 a.m. With my socks on, I sit on the chair until it's my breakfast time at 7 a.m., 8 a.m. They will complain. So what are care providers supposed to do? They go after people with dementia. They go after people who can't speak for themselves. So it's the most vulnerable in our society that continues to get exploited. And I think these are the people that all the members in the House, I know you have the heart to serve those people. And I wonder sometimes if we are paying close enough attention to those, if we are really trying our hardest, if we are being really fiscally responsible and frugal, are we going after every penny in every way possible, or are we being extremely generous to a certain group of people and expect others to cough out the dough? Those are my questions, and I think those are legitimate questions that residents of Burnaby-Lougheed, residents I think throughout BC has, and they expect to get these answers from their government. Now, on that note, there is an aspect on the education, skills training, and advanced education that I would like to touch on. And I think there's no disagreement in the House, I'm sure, that investing in skills training and advanced education is critical for a strong economy. And there has been some investments that I saw in the budget going towards, again, a very carved out special sector that will feed the LNG industry. But what of the rest? When you're looking at that $10 that came in and you're spending that $10 and you're prioritizing, when you put money into a certain area, that means you automatically had to take it out of some other areas in order to make the numbers work, in order to balance that budget, which is a good thing. Balancing the budget is a good thing, and I agree with that. But as far as how were the priorities, how did the decisions come to be to funnel those money and that resources to the LNG industry, and what are some other sectors that have been grossly starved in the process? That's a conversation that I was never a part of. That's a conversation that I don't think any of us over on this side had a full chance to participate. And that's, again, another aspect of this democracy that we have in BC that I'm starting to discover, and it's a surprise every time. So on that, there are a few things that I would like to propose for the members' consideration, especially for those ministers that are in cabinet. On the environmental note, I absolutely do believe that we can have strong developments that are done responsibly using sustainable measures and practices. But I hope the government in their next budget in the future, because I certainly didn't see it this time around, is that they do put some money and put some focus onto those green technologies that will take us in the right direction for the future, not just the LNG, but the green technologies such as the one that's being pursued by the engineers that are in Burnaby. It's a group called G4, and I had the pleasure of meeting that particular group and introducing them to some of the members in this house. And G4 is a group that came up with a patented technology. And it's a great technology where they're able to convert the existing biomass in the forest and funnel it through this, their machine, and then out comes out LNG in a clean, sustainable way. This is an incredible project that has garnished some international attention. But what was sad for me is that this group came asking for help because the interest that they were able to get from our government to help push this project forward was so minimal, to the point that the group that is sponsoring and commissioning this G4 initiatives is California. The fact that we have our own scientists, our own inventors, our own technology that is Canadian, that is British Columbian, that's coming out of Burnaby, but we are not the one that's pushing and supporting this project, but in fact, it's our neighbors south of the border, again, commissioning this project. That is something that was devastating for me to find out. And again, I urge the government to consider sponsoring and really supporting some of the science and technology that's being developed right here in our local soil. On the small business and tourism side, I do want to point out groups of people that I think our system is not catching, that are falling through the crack. And these are the group of people that I have as owner-operated businesses. A lot of our ethnic community, our immigrant community falls into that group of people, where they come in, foreign credentials are not recognized. They come in with some stipulation on their immigration to start a business, make capital investments. And a lot of these people are that mama and papa shop. They don't have many employees. They're micro businesses with less than 5 employees. In fact, that makes up over 80% of our small business landscape. And these are the people that when MSP does increase, they're the ones that are paying. When the hydro goes up for an average laundromat that's paying thousands of dollars on electricity to keep their businesses going, when the hydro goes up 28%, with a single decision that rolls out like that, those are the businesses that get hurt. When the cost of operations from transportation to their utility bills, the bank surcharges, those are all real costs of operation that are keeping the growth of these businesses from what it could be. All the while, these entrepreneurs, some of the hardest working entrepreneurs, I'm a daughter to 2 of such people, and they're the ones that are struggling with all the other affordability challenges that we just talked about, from housing costs, transportation costs, healthcare costs, education costs, childcare costs. So these are the people that I think our system as it stands right now, and there's nothing in the budget that would really help these people get the hand they need in order to grow their business into a sustainable practice where they can have the kind of life that they deserve, and also to be able to go on beyond and establish themselves as a medium-sized businesses. So, Honorable Speaker, on that note, there's also a thing on tourism that I think is worthwhile for the members of the House to pay attention to, which is the fact that largely due to the quickly changing federal policies with immigration, the number of tourists, especially from East Asia, has gone down drastically. And so what that means is, as a number of international students from Korea, which has decreased by half, from Japan, from China, as those numbers dwindle or they become very volatile, you're looking at businesses right here locally in my constituency, especially where you have ethnic cuisine restaurants, you have tourism sector that specifically feeds and caters to those tourist traffic that British Columbia attracts. We are looking at a government who, again, can push a little harder to make sure that our tourism sector continues to survive in this.
Thank you, member.
Thank you.